Hi, I'm Catherine Park, an immigration attorney in the United States. In this video, I'll talk about the migrant crisis. There are waves and waves of migrants, job seekers oftentimes, leaving their home countries because of economic collapse and trying to enter more developed nations such as the United States and the European Union nations so that they can find work and build a better life. Now, the problem for the receiving nations is the migrants are arriving at the borders in such huge numbers. For example, last year at the southern border of the United States, 2 million undocumented migrants were apprehended. And that's just the ones that were apprehended. Coming from mainly Venezuela, Honduras, Ecuador, Guatemala, Colombia, and Haiti. The sheer number of arrivals compels an examination of the causes of immigration from those nations. Immigration refers to admission to a receiving country with the intent to reside there permanently, and emigration means departure from your country with the intent to leave permanently. So in Europe, they receive a lot of irregular migration and asylum seekers as well from many parts of the world. And those are conflict zones, as we know, but they're also mismanaged. There's no managerial ability in the governments of those nations. People grab power and they assume power, but they don't know how to run a government. There are lots of moving parts to a government, lots of providing services and boosting and regulating the private sector. And so the economies of those mismanaged nations collapse and cause people to migrate. Now, what happens with nations is similar to what happens with private companies that may collapse financially. Everybody watching this video probably has experience working for a company that was mismanaged. In the headlines recently, about 2 months ago, we had the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, two of the large regional banks headquartered in the United States that had overexposure to the technology sector and a management that refused to hedge the risk of the overexposure, although the tech sector is known to be volatile, known to change rather quickly. So ultimately, the depositors fled those banks, just like migrants fleeing the nations that are mismanaged. And who else flees when a nation is mismanaged? Entrepreneurs and doctors and engineers, they all flee, which causes a brain drain in the nation, which makes recovery and rebuilding that much more difficult. But maybe you've never worked at a private company that imploded because of bad management. So what about your apartment complex? Did you ever have a landlord who ignored your messages and refused to fix plumbing leaks, refused to arrange for garbage collection, wouldn't repair the exterior doors if the locks were broken, and when there was a gas leak, the landlord just wouldn't do anything about it? Now, you would have to flee that apartment complex. You would even have to break the lease and move out because safety is compromised. So with those illustrations, we understand what's going on with the migrant crisis. We understand why people are fleeing those nations by the millions. Now let's talk about the Western Hemisphere. When people flee a nation because the nation has collapsed economically, in Venezuela, for instance, about 20% of the population has migrated elsewhere, mainly to Colombia and other Latin American nations. But about 200,000 actually walked to the United States last year. And among the people who don't leave are organized crime, drug cartels, and gangs. And meanwhile, the people there cannot afford food, and basic services are not available. And while they do have charismatic leadership, because how else do you grab power? Except by charismatic leadership, but it takes more than charisma to manage a government. There's a lack of managerial know-how in those nations. For example, if a drug cartel tries to strong-arm a city, would the government know how to respond? Do they know how to do anything except take a bribe or maybe legalize drugs so that the government can take over the drug enterprise, decriminalize the drugs, and regulate and distribute the drugs themselves to turn their own people into zombies, okay? Which is effectively what the governments have done in those nations that are cooperating with the cartels. Visionary leadership is great and all that. Policy-making expertise is great and all that, but you need managerial talent that doesn't just sit on their hands whenever there's a problem. You need people who don't accept the notion that some problems are too stubborn to be fixed. For example, America isn't controlled by the drug cartels. Many countries throughout the world are not controlled by the drug cartels, so it is possible to fix that problem. Jesus said, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." In contrast, the drug trade destroys life. And as we've witnessed in South America and Central America, the drug trade holds entire societies hostage to the criminals who are driven by greed. The entire criminal enterprise is built upon making victims, making addicts, and the entire panoply of organized crime activities such as prostitution, gambling, robbery, racketeering, bribery, and corruption are spawned in the wake of the immorality of the drug cartels and gangs. So there's a reason why the U.S. immigration laws treat drug crimes so harshly, so very harshly. Selling drugs is characterized by a reckless indifference to human life. I mean, it is an enterprise that makes addicts, makes victims. The United States knows this and doesn't want to admit such people into the U.S. who don't care about their fellow human beings. An individual who makes money by placing people in bondage to drugs will never be legal in the United States. Often the United States is vilified, especially on social media, because the algorithm could amplify a person who's a bad influence. But the truth is, Americans care about each other. Americans care about people. That's why we're so successful as a nation. And that's why the drug cartels in South America and Central America live in fear of the DEA. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. The DEA doesn't mess around. Or, I should say, if they mess with a person, that person is going to stay messed. And they were already a mess because they're a drug dealer. So they were an easy target for the DEA. And the U.S. doesn't just go after easy targets. The U.S. government is oftentimes a sleeping giant. We haven't scratched the surface, really, of what the United States can accomplish. So our enemies are forced to tread lightly. Now, this YouTube channel often pays homage to film, groundbreaking films which speak to our times and to all times. The Equalizer film series deserves a shout out here. If you don't know the plot of the films, Denzel Washington portrays Robert McCall, a former U.S. Marine and highly skilled and deadly former assassin for the U.S. government. Think about SEAL Team 6 or the Special Forces, the Green Berets. But even more elite than that most exclusive club in the U.S. military. In the films, he's retired, and what he does is help ordinary folks who find themselves in the sights of organized crime. Now, organized crime doesn't have the same morals as the rest of us, and so the Equalizer, who is highly skilled in the art of pushing back, levels the playing field so that ordinary folks can enjoy the life that Jesus gave his life for us to have. In conclusion, drug traffickers do not value human life, and that disqualifies them from any category of admission as an immigrant or non-immigrant to the United States. Let's be reminded of the words of Jesus. I came that they may have life and have it to the full.